Well, hello and welcome to the first ever EnviroStars Small Business Meetup. In this series, we're going to host monthly 30-minute meetups with an EnviroStars recognized small business owner to discuss topics related to sustainable business practices. Featured businesses and topics will be announced on our website and social media channels 1 week in advance. Today, we look forward to speaking with Tom, founder, president, and designer at Tom Bihn. Tom Bihn creates a variety of awesome travel bags, luggage, accessories, and even face masks, which you will hear about soon. The company is truly committed to operating as sustainably as it can. And as we talk with Tom today, we'll get a good insight into Tom Bihn. And I'm just, so happy to have you here. Tom, let's just start out. Can you tell us a little bit about your company and how it began?
I started making bags and backpacks and outdoor equipment when I was 10 or 11 years old. I was kind of a nascent outdoorsy guy. I wanted to do more hiking and camping and backpacking. And this would be in the late 60s, early 70s, sort of the in many ways the golden era of the early days of the North Face and Sierra Zines and all those companies in the Bay Area and all the companies in Boulder and companies up here in Seattle that were just, answering the consumer need or consumer demand for more outdoor equipment, that the backpacking craze. And I was swept up in that, but I was just a kid. I wanted all that cool equipment, but I was 10 years old. I didn't have any money. My parents said, well, you get a after school job and earn the money, which I was naturally disinclined to do because that meant I had to have an after school job instead of doing something more fun. Or you could learn how to make your own equipment. And that's what I did. I started, my mom taught me how to use a sewing machine. My dad was an airline pilot, so he had been a mechanic before that. So he knew a lot about basic, working with metals and design and stuff like that. Not like he was some aeronautics engineer or something, but he gave me the real basics of how to work with materials. So I started making stuff when I was 10. I made stuff throughout my teens. I sold backpacks and down jackets to my classmates and my high school teachers. And my 20s, I sort of put that on the back burner and worked for about 5 years in special education with adults and children with a variety of disabilities and challenges. That was super interesting, super fun, and taught me a lot about myself and the world. Second half of my 20s, I managed the youth hostel in Santa Cruz, which was pretty cool too, very different thing. And then when I was about to turn 30, I realized, what am I going to do from now on? What do I want to do? What do I love doing the most? And the answer just welled up inside of me. I like making stuff. So I just went back to making stuff. So here I am.
That's great. Here you are. And I did look on your website a bit before, and I got to see the video of you actually like drafting things and working with the materials, and that was very cool to see. You work, with a lot of different materials and the whole process. How, maybe you can tell us a bit about like the sustainable part of that work that you do, or the sustainable actions that you take as a company. Like, how do you incorporate that into your process at Tom Bihn?
Let me see if I can adjust this light here a little bit. The sun is changing its angle on me. Well, most of the materials, pretty much all the materials, the fabrics we use, the componentry of the bags and backpacks are synthetics. They're petrochemicals, refined to be the durable fabrics and materials that we're all so used to having around us. We are thinking more and more about the future and the alternatives to those materials. We haven't gotten real far in that. And sadly, the industry hasn't gotten super far in that. We are incorporating some recycled nylons at this point. There's not a whole lot of drive in that. I mean, there's companies like Patagonia that are pushing ahead with that stuff, and that's awesome. And we hope to be, part of that. We're a much smaller company, so we end up riding on their coattails maybe a little bit. But for us just to take the low-hanging fruit of the sustainability options that either we come up with or are offered to us are, within the factory, becoming more energy efficient in the factory, participating, for example, in the city of Seattle's Green Up energy program, where we pay a tiny bit extra for to support renewables. We do, within the factory, of course, we do try to recycle as much, all the cardboard, all the paper we can. And thank goodness the city of Seattle's recycling program, at least with those materials, is like the best there is, as far as I can tell. So we definitely participate in that. We do, like, we're a direct to market consumer. So we don't ship out a giant pallet full of our backpacks or bags to some retailer or some distributor. We distribute directly to the retailer, to the retail consumer, from our shop. So you get on our website and you buy a bag and we ship it to you. It's pretty simple and streamlined in a way. But so we do pay attention to the amount of materials and resources that go into our shipping and our internal processes. One of the things that I've just been thinking of a lot myself is how, I'm like everybody else. I order some stuff from Amazon, once maybe, once a week. And you just see how, as consumers, we've grown to expect that everything we get is in a plastic bag and then grouped together with its other components in a bigger plastic bag, and then put in a plastic bag, and then put in a box, or maybe another shipping plastic bag. And
it seems like so much unnecessary plastic.
Hugely unnecessary. I mean, there's times where stuff is fragile. I don't want to order a fine piece of pottery or something and have them toss it into a paper box and ship it to me, because it's probably not going to make it. But there is a huge amount of unnecessary packaging. And so we never do that. When we make a backpack or bag, it gets put in a cart that goes and gets those products stacked on shelves or hung from walls. And then they go from that into a completely recyclable cardboard shipping box, and they get shipped to you. So it never goes into a plastic bag to be taken out of a plastic bag. I mean, there's some minor exceptions to that, where if we have small plastic parts that we're sending a customer that need to be grouped together. But even little things like that, I mean, those are things that we're always thinking about, of like, okay, so how could we just not do that anymore? How could we pull that out? How could we use something other than a plastic bag? So I think that, I mean, that's like I say, that's the low hanging fruit. That's the easy stuff to do.
It's easy, but it's also, I mean, I think it is something that people struggle with is figuring out this packaging situation. It's at the forefront of people's minds right now. So I think it's awesome that you guys are tackling that.
And it's interesting. I mean, to me, I grew up, I tell people I grew up the first time I grew up in Santa Cruz. And I remember in the 80s, I would ride my bicycle to the food co-op with my little cotton sacks that I had sewn myself, and I'd fill them up with wheat flour and rice and whatever. And I'd come home with almost no packaging, maybe a glass bottle that had juice in it or something, And now, even if I go to the natural food store, so much of that is already packaged. And we were on this path for a while to be like, yeah, you don't need that packaging. Bring your own packaging, your reusable packaging, and we'll work with you on that. And that's, I don't know what we got sidetracked on that. So,
well, and I think the pandemic certainly hasn't helped with that. Yeah. I mean, that plastic has come back so much, and so I'm sure that's something that you have encountered. But yeah, I mean, speaking of the pandemic, are there any ways your business has kind of pivoted during it?
Other than just what we produce, because we're mostly for the last year have not made bags and backpacks. We have been making masks.
Masks. Yeah. Tell us more about that.
Huge pivot in terms of what we did. And when I say we, I work remotely, excuse me. And it's my two business partners that really did the heavy lifting on that pivoting. I mean, I helped developing the designs and patterns for the mask. And I developed all the PDF files that you download from our website so you can make the mask at home. So, it's definitely participating in a regular way, but my business partners did that heavy lifting of trying to pivot everything. So yes, we're making masks. We're slowly making less masks because as you two could probably testify to, you probably have a bunch of masks and you are washing them and reusing them and losing them. And sometimes you need to get more, but you've kind of saturated that need in your life, probably. And a lot of people have. So, we're still selling masks and that's great, but that's, and if things do change with a vaccine and all that, is maybe eventually we don't wear masks so much or at all anymore. None of us like to wear masks, we hope.
Even the cool Tom Bihn masks, right?
Yeah, and they're not that cool. Come on, it's a mask, who wants to look at a mask? Maybe some of us are introverts and we'd prefer wearing a mask. I don't know, but I always think it's so interesting to be, peripheral to we were all part of it, the whole politics of mask wearing or not mask wearing and stuff like that. And I think we've kind of missed this huge opportunity to, can I riff here for a moment? Sorry. We've missed this opportunity to say to the people who won't wear masks, it's like, dude, we don't want to wear masks either. We want to hang out with our bros and drink beers and tell jokes and spit at each other or whatever. We're all human. We want to do that. It's what we want to do. We got to stop doing that for a while. That's all this is about. We got to slow that progress of that virus. It's not about, dude, we don't like hanging out, drinking beer with our friends and you're weird because you do. It's like, no, we all want to hang out, and maybe not beer, maybe wine, maybe something else, maybe whatever. But it's all like, most of us really need to hang out with other people. And wearing a mask is not that cool with that. So
maybe that's a design opportunity for you all it's temporary. Let's put that across the mask.
Actually, we did work on some masks. I had a mask that we were going to do maybe embroidery on it, a text embroidery that with a space below the text that you could write with chalk on the fabric. So you could say, the text said, "Today my mood is," and you could draw a smiley face or a frowny face or whatever, But
that's a great idea.
We got distracted and that wasn't going anywhere. But so we've pivoted to make masks. That's been huge, because the materials that you make a mask out of radically different than what you make a backpack out of. And people think, well, you have a sewing machine, shouldn't you be able to do it? And it's like, yeah, but it's not super straightforward. It's a challenge because you're dealing with lighter weight materials. They handle differently, literally handle, like the people pushing them through the sewing machines have to adapt their skills to do that. You have to change over the sewing machines to sew thinner thread for the thinner material. All these things were doable and we did them, but they're not like just flip a switch and say, now we're making masks. So it was a lot of work to make that change. And at the same time, we're like, okay, so we're inviting our employees back into our facility to make masks. How do we make that as safe as possible for them, transmitting diseases between each other, between them and the shipping staff and, everybody. So that's been this whole parallel theme to like what we present to the public and what we sell in terms of masks and mask patterns made available to home sewers. There's all that front, but there's also, we love our people who show up and work for us every day. It's amazing. It's great. We want to keep them healthy. We don't want them to be vectors in the community. We don't want them to be vectors within our facilities. So
yeah,
a bunch of stuff that my business partner Darcy took on to do that. And initially it was what everybody said to do, clean your surfaces, wash your hands a lot, and that's always good. Those are good things to do. But we're I think ahead of the curve, realizing that we needed to do air exchanges in the factory constantly. So a couple times a day, we open up the big roll-up industrial garage doors. And fortunately, where our factory is in Seattle, there's always a cross breeze going through there. And very quickly, we can exchange all of that air. And I think that's been important because so far, we haven't had any of our employees test positive. So
Awesome.
that, except for the ones that had already gone home because they didn't want to work anymore. So, but anybody coming and going into our factory, knocking on wood, we've managed to do that so far. So,
Oh, that's great. No, it sounds like you take great care of your team there at Tom Bihn. And I'm curious too, just on the subject of masks, I've been hearing that some people have made masks that have like, it's like accessibility for people with disabilities. So like you can have a clear window. Do you all make masks that have that so that you can actually see, like lip read, for instance?
no, and that's been we followed that as well. And the short answer is no, we don't do that. What's interesting is that I used to be an interpreter for the deaf. I said I worked in special ed, and one of my jobs was, I was never a really good interpreter, but I revolved around that world and in and out of the interpreting world. So, and I still have deaf friends, and I can sign really well and all that. So I understand that that is a huge thing. I will never tell you that like being able to read someone's, what they're saying, to see. I think partly what people miss is that there's a lot of hearing impaired people who we relate to perhaps as deaf, who actually can read lips to a certain extent. If you can't see the lips, you can't read them for sure. And there's people that can hear. This is important with older people who actually have only a mild hearing impediment. They can tell the difference between certain sounds that their brain is having trouble distinguishing by the shape of the person's lips. So that's super important. So the importance of that, undeniable. And the fact that there's not more masks that accommodate that is too bad. In what little we've done, what we realized is that what you want to do there in terms of the visual thing is to have a clear plastic thing that you can see through, which is by definition not letting any air through. And that suddenly doesn't work with your whole breathability thing and your filtration thing. So you end up with a mask that's impermeable wherever it's clear plastic, and the amount of material around that that's not impermeable, that is permeable, is pretty minimal, and you're probably just breathing around your mask all the time. So I think while the science has shown that wearing a full, like a welder's face mask kind of thing is not very effective, it is somewhat effective, and that's about, I hope I'm wrong on that. I hope that someone stands to correct me and shows me a clear face mask that hearing impaired people can not only use themselves communicating between each other, but also have their family members and people around them, where that actually does filter and doesn't just blow germs or virus around the clear shield.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of it structurally like that. I think I was just thinking about, oh, how do we, have people be able to lip read? But there's all these struggles that we come up with one answer, and then there are more struggles, and so
Yep.
certainly, I mean, businesses have had to be, like yours, have had to be pretty resilient through all this, and kind of pioneers, because it's been so unprecedented in a lot of senses, and at least in terms of your thinking. Um, and yeah, so in that sense, I think transitioning over to, because your business is it's an EnviroStars recognized business, and so we want to celebrate that, and that's a big part of what we're talking about today. And yeah, I guess one of my questions is, how has being an EnviroStars business, a green business, how has that recognition affected your business?
I would say for us, it's pretty difficult to measure what that means to the customer, the consumer. Are they choosing one of our products because we are specifically an EnviroStar certified business? And we kind of, depending on the day of the week you ask us that, we might have a different gut sense of how much difference that makes to people. At the end of the day, even if the consumer doesn't particularly care, it matters to us. We are all environmentalists and pretty outdoorsy, and we understand the, obviously not completely, but we attempt to understand the impacts of what we do, particularly in our business, those impacts on the environment, and we try to mitigate them whenever possible. And I would say that we could get into all the other initiatives that we've been part of and their importance. But at the end of the day, I think we're just all scratching the surface of what we could really do. And if I can be on a soapbox again for another moment, I would say that, we know the term greenwashing, and I, definitely companies engage in that. And fair enough. I think that's a good finger to point, not to necessarily launch a boycott and say, oh, you're greenwashing us. But I think the consumer needs to reflect on that too, because my experience is sometimes that the consumer is concerned about the environment and they want to know that the company they're dealing with is concerned as well. But they often don't want to really get into the weeds on it. They just want to be told, oh, is this renewable? Is this sustainable? And if you say, yeah, this is a sustainable product, that's it. They're just on board. They're going to buy your thing. And, almost everything we do as humans is having a negative impact on the environment. There's not a whole lot that we do that is particularly benign. I mean, you look at, for example, agriculture, you say, oh, well, organic, unsprayed agriculture, good for the world. Well, you also look at the fact that at least in America, we throw out, 30 or 40% of what we grow. And if you could reduce that significantly by using everything, that means you could potentially, for example, agriculture could utilize 30 or 40% less of the land that it uses. I mean, turn that on its head and say, okay, you want wildlife corridors, you want bird habitat, you want all that. Don't throw away so much food, and we could reduce our footprint of our agricultural, agriculture is still, if not the biggest, one of the biggest impacts on the the biosphere. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to, send a red herring and divert attention from industry, because industry is, often the impacts of industry, while smaller in geographic footprint, are much greater in terms of the impact on the environment and on endangered species, certainly on communities of color that are, way overrepresented in the amount of impact of industrial effluva waste and byproduct that they're subjected to. I mean, we know all those things, and
Sure.
they shouldn't be political. They're not political things. They're not political. They're just realities that, as good neighbors, as human beings, we need to talk about those things and work towards mitigating them. And as consumers, to, hold companies accountable and engage in that conversation.
Yeah, I think accountability is a big point, and I think it really speaks to your company and to who you are as a the principal and the leader of the company, that you're willing to dig deep and, like you said, get into kind of the weeds of it. Regardless, you may be working with textiles and plastics and things like that, but it's clear that you are thinking beyond that and kind of trying to figure out how can we do better. And I think that's something that a lot of EnviroStars businesses, that's what sets them apart, is that not necessarily that they're doing everything exactly right by the book in terms of sustainability, but that they're always striving for that. So yeah, we appreciate absolutely what you're doing and how you're thinking. Um, I guess as a follow-up question, do you have any advice for business owners who are considering joining EnviroStars?
Do it. Don't hesitate. Pull the trigger on that. Do that. And, but don't quit there. Don't think that that's the end of the story, because there's always more to do. And not that it's a pointless thing because you'll never get it done. But know that it's a journey. That in sustainability is not something that you're going to arrive at. It's a lodestar. It's a direction that you head towards, and check that box, do all the EnviroStar stuff, and then look at what's the next thing to do. And if your customers say, hey, I don't care about the environment, well, that's going to catch up with them someday. And you don't need to say, well, my customers don't care about it, so why should I? It's like, well, you need to care about it because, I think it's Yvon Chouinard at Patagonia who says there's no business to be done on a dead planet. And we all have to remember that's it's not going to look good if some of the environmental devastation that we're seem to be headed towards comes to fruition. We need to whatever we can do, carbon footprint, carbon neutral. We need to look at those things. That's not a hoax. That's some real stuff, and pay attention to it. It's a starting point, really.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. So then I guess to sort of wrap up the conversation, what is next then? What is the next step for Tom Bihn?
Well, in terms of environmental impacts, so one of the things that am thinking of, and certainly if anybody out there is thinking the same way and wants to join in another Zoom conversation later, I really think that we need to look at our role as being an industry that consumes or is a middle agent to the synthetic textile world. Use whatever leverage we have. I'm a tiny consumer of nylon compared to all the other guys in the outdoor bag world, but if whatever we can do to put more pressure on the companies that make the original fibers to look at what that impact is in the greater biosphere. You look at we talk about ocean plastics, and we would very want to quickly say, well, there's these waste streams in third world countries that dump plastics into the ocean. It's like, yeah, that's a really important place to start. But all of us are using plastics, and it's not really going anywhere. It's mostly not being recycled, whether it's your plastic bags from Amazon or your Tom Bihn bag. It's not an easily recycled thing. And we made this stuff up. It's a world that the scientists and the consumers and the industrialists all got together and dreamed up, and we can dream up a better world that those materials can get recycled or can be turned into something that is truly biologically inert or even biologically helpful. Because right now, not just the ocean plastics, but any synthetic material we deal with is going to end up somewhere in the biosphere. And we need to change that, because not only is there no there's no business to be done on a dead planet, but it's also, there's no fun to be had. This would be a really lonely place if it was just us and a bunch of plastic on this planet. I'm not interested in that.
That's true.
Where I live, my neighbors are humans and bears and all kinds of other wildlife. And all of this is upstream from a huge biosphere in the ocean. And we all got to work this out and get along and treat and respect our neighbors, human and otherwise.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. That's
so if anybody wants to talk about it, the synthetic fiber replacement in industrial products, for me, it's kind of this interesting realization that we've always wanted to build the most durable product imaginable. And now I'm beginning to think, maybe we don't want to make it that durable. Maybe we want to make it out of something that breaks down naturally and you can toss in your compost pile and truly is inert. Doesn't just break down to smaller bits of plastic that you don't see anymore, but actually is, so.
That's great. Those are such great conversation, meaty conversations, I feel like, to be had about, how can we take this a step further, specifically like in your industry with textiles, and like how do we break it down. Would be great conversations to have on our we have a new EnviroStars kind of business network. It's an exclusive network for EnviroStars registered businesses. So that would be, I think, a great place to have some of these conversations. So anyone who watches this, feel free to get on there, and we can start having some of these conversations and have them with Tom. And Tom, I'll be sure to get you into the network after our talk.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know much, but I know where we need to take it. I see it. I see what
yeah,
we're
it
looking
sounds
at
like you
down
have
the
so
road.
much experience, and you have such a unique perspective, I think, on a lot of these issues, because it's so niche, your area of expertise. So I'm excited to see where the conversation flows from there. And I just want to thank you for being our first ever guest on this small business meetup. Yeah, it was great to have these conversations with you again. We can continue these dialogues on the EnviroStars Business Network. And I do want to briefly, because you're in the frame here, I want to introduce Aista here, who is helping. She is helping with our she's part of the EnviroStars team and is a wizard helping with a lot of the behind the scenes and social media things. So we're very grateful to have this conversation with you, Tom, and look forward to seeing what you're doing next.
Thank you, and a pleasure to meet you. And I look forward to continuing these conversations. And next time I'll shut up and listen. It will be a lot of fun.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. See ya.